brand new series, Chasing the Vision. This series is fresh in 2024. I am always excited to bring new content to the restoration and cleaning industries and the audience. And this is a really, really exciting series that we're bringing out in partnership with Exit Strategies 360 and Violand Management Associates. So this series is all about helping restoration company owners, leaders, and managers achieve and chase your visions for your companies. There's a lot that goes into running a company, whether you are the owner or you're a lieutenant, which we're going to be talking about, managers, leaders, whatever position you're in. There is a lot to running a restoration company, and a lot of it goes right back to helping the owner chase that vision and the overall vision of the company. And that's what we're here to talk about: how to succeed and chase that vision, bring value, look at your future, and just create the best possible company that you can for whatever your end goal may be. So we hope that each episode is going to help bring clarity and clear actions you can take back to your company as you chase your vision. I am excited to be joined by JT Cry, who's with Exit Strategies 360, and Tim Hull with Violand Management Associates. I'm going to stop talking now and turn it over to them because I want them to both introduce themselves to you. For if you are unfamiliar with them, they are going to be guests with me through this entire series. There's going to be a monthly video on a different topic related to chasing your vision. So JT, I'm going to toss it over to you first to kind of introduce yourself and share a little bit about your background in the industry.
Well, thank you, Michelle. Appreciate the wonderful introduction, and it's a pleasure to be joined by both of you. I consider this an elite group, so thank you. JT here. My company is Exit Strategies, and I've been specializing in the disaster restoration space now on a national level for 15 years. And what I do is educate people. I start with evaluation and analysis. I want them to understand the key questions and answers, so they're making a decision based on something other than emotion. And I want them to know what it's worth, why it's worth what it's worth, where the funds are going to go, tax minimization, wealth preservation, how to make it more sellable or more valuable, etc. It would be a big disservice if I couldn't provide those answers. And then once they're ready to go and they've got all their ducks in a row, then we can package them up and get them sold. But what it leads to is both a successful sale for the business and a successful retirement. Whether that's in the near term or it takes 5 or 8 years of planning to get there, that's a victory all the way around. But yeah, again, pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, Tim, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, Michelle, and thanks to JT for organizing this really and coming up with the idea of putting this on. I know Violand Management is excited to be a part of it, and looking forward to an exciting year full of podcasts here, maybe even many more. Myself personally, I've been with Violand Management now for 15 years on the consulting side of the restoration industry. Prior to that, I worked with 2 fairly large restorers. One was a national company, and the other was a local market leader. And I really I fell in love with this business back shortly after 9/11 in 2001, and been in it ever since. I have the fortunate seat to be able to work with restorers all throughout the U.S., Canada, and Australia now. And we employ a proprietary system called our Sustained Profitable Growth Model, which encompasses kind of a holistic approach to helping them coach and grow their businesses. And JT and I have crossed paths several times on I think both sides of transactions over the years. And so it's been an interesting venture for us, and I'm excited to be able to team up with him and roundtable some topics that really add value to companies, restoration companies, and ultimately their value down the road.
I love it. I was thinking about both of you as I was prepping for recording today, and I realized between the two of you, you have experience with probably thousands of restoration companies you've worked with together, I would bet at this point. So I can't imagine any two a better pair to be going through this conversation with. So before we get into what the first video is going to be about, which is owner involvement in a restoration company, I want to help us set the stage on, we're talking about vision and chasing the vision. So I think we need to lay the groundwork on what a vision is. So Tim, I'm curious, how many companies do you run into that don't have a clear vision, and what does it look like to create a vision that's actually actionable for the company?
Right. Good question, Michelle. Unfortunately, I think the answer is very few. Even though everybody starts a business with some end in mind, or some reason in mind, that means they really kind of lack the clarity on what the end might look like. I've always said for years that people start businesses for one of 3 reasons: to sell them, to pass them down, or because the owners are unemployable, and they bought themselves a job, is what they did. But as a business continues to grow, and if it becomes successful, you get past that 3 to 5 year kind of startup mark, that's when business owners really start to pay attention and say, oh my God, this thing actually is working for me, and I've got a legitimate business on my hands. Now, what do I want to do with it? And it's at that juncture that I think it becomes clear, at least to the owner, that they really need to start thinking about what is it that I want this entity to become. And that's where we see people struggle, being able to, even if they have a picture in their mind, being able to clearly articulate it to their staff and to others as to what they want out of this thing that they created.
JT, do you have anything to add to that? I know that you talk to a lot of people that just want a valuation of their company. Maybe they're not ready to sell, but they're curious, where are we at? So what role does an overall vision kind of play into what a company's valuation can end up being? How important is that vision in driving that component?
Well, it's key. And I want to add on one quick comment to Tim's, and that is that once a business is started by an owner, those skill sets, attitudes, the focus, the challenges all have to morph over the years as it turns into a going concern. And many owners don't know how to change their focus and skill sets and really evolve from wearing 15 hats to maybe wearing 2 or 3. And that's one of the things we're going to cover over this next year. And so I'm really excited to take this journey with you. But the vision is, there's always an end game, as Tim said, and that end game is really muddy. It's not a lane that most owners are familiar with. And so they reach out to people like Tim or myself, and they want answers about what it may look like and the variables involved in how to get there. And sometimes they just don't know. They're too far in the weeds to really take a look and get their head out of the weeds and realize what may be making the company more valuable. And sometimes it's some really simple changes that are not shocking, they're not drastic, and you can add hundreds of thousands or millions to the bottom line at the point of an exit. And we'll no doubt be talking about a few of those maybe in this episode and future episodes for sure.
Perfect.
Jeff, just if I could share a story to that point, I think a lot of owners sometimes think that it's too late.
Yeah.
I'm too far gone, or I'm too old to really think about what I want from this thing, or what my vision should be. I'm here to tell you it's never too late. I recently got an email a couple months ago from a client I'm working with, and this lady had gone on to explain to me in an email that, hey, I'm 60 some years old. I have no plan for retirement. My business is disheveled, and really it was like, oh man, you want to reach out and you want to feel sorry. But at that point, you've got a critical juncture there. Do I cash in the chips, or do I really get serious about this? But to your point, it doesn't take long once you do clarify that vision, at least for yourself and for others, that you can right that ship and you can really create some value very quickly, especially in a mature business.
Yeah, the thing I hear the most is, I should have called you 2 or 3 years ago when I first thought of it. And sometimes when I get a phone call, and you know this, Tim, they're hanging on to the end of their rope with just their fingernails, and they don't have any gas left in the tank. If you give yourself 2 or 3 years to maybe affect some change, the attitude and the ability to affect that change, and the road ahead isn't nearly as challenging as it otherwise might be.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt.
Okay, well, that was the perfect setup we're going to jump into what's effectively episode 1. Now that we've laid the groundwork for what this series is going to be, we're going to jump into episode 1 right out of the gate here. And we're going to talk about owner involvement. That's what JT and Tim have kind of been talking about out of the gate. And it's so common for owners to wear too many hats and lack delegation, lack trust, control issues, whatever it may be. And, it's hard to hold people accountable. There's so many things that go into an owner being involved. And so, Tim, I'm going to have you set the scene here. You mentioned kind of that 3 to 5 year mark earlier in the conversation, but where does an owner's involvement really shift? Is there an employee size? Is there a revenue size? Like, where do you start seeing that shift from being an owner operator to being more of an owner that needs to move out of working in the business and work on it?
Yeah. Well, of course, every business is different, right? So
Sure.
it depends on your operating model. So putting a dollar size on it, or even a number of employees, I think is very difficult.
Yep.
Time does play a little bit of a role in all of that, only in that you've only got so much operating capital at startup. So when you get to that 3 to 5 year window, you've invested just about everything that you can in the business, and either the business is sustainable at that point, meaning it can generate enough capital to cover its operating expenses, or it doesn't. And usually in that window, that's where we see businesses either really take off or fail. But I think what we're talking about here is, at what point does the owner realize, hey, I can't just go out and be an operator in the field, an owner operator anymore. I've really got to start spending time working on my business, putting policies, practices, procedures in place, spending time on hiring, thinking about my strategy and my pricing models, and all the other stuff that goes along with running a business. I just yesterday I had some contractors at my house doing some work, and I was talking to the individual who happens to be the nephew of the owners of the business. And I said, so how did you get involved in the business? And he said, well, I got involved a few years ago when the guys, my uncles decided, hey, we've got so much work and so many people and so many jobs going on right now that we need somebody to help us with the business side. And that's where they brought him in to help assist. Was he brought the academic and fundamental knowledge on how to run a business while they could continue to be tradesmen. And that's where their business went from 800,000 to 3 million, wherever they're at today. So to put a dollar or a size figure on it, Michelle, I think is difficult, but you certainly know it when you see businesses get to that point. The challenge, and we'll probably talk about this a little later on, is that when you get to that point, the owners, because they're now moving into uncharted waters that they're unfamiliar with, they have a tendency to want to migrate back to things that they're doing that are comfortable to them. So if they enjoy swimming a hammer, if they enjoy out selling in the field, whatever it is, they want to continue to do those things instead of learn and adapt to the new functions that they need to play as an owner in a business.
Yes, perfect. So JT, talk a little bit about then the difference between day-to-day involvement and moving into a strategic involvement role. And then once somebody reaches that strategic involvement role, like Tim said, how do you stay out of the weeds? Once you've made it there, how do you avoid going back all the time? I think there might be instances where you need to go back if there's a fire and you need to help put out a fire. But for the most part, once you're in this strategic role, how do you avoid going back?
Well, Tim gave me the perfect segue. Number one, working on your business doesn't typically happen from your truck. And many owners start their business, they're in their truck, they're out in the field, they're putting out fires, estimating, project managing, etc. Working on your business typically happens at your desk. And to Tim's point, that's often an uncomfortable place. And once you can get comfortable there and get out of that, your old comfort zone, and work on things that may be a little bit unfamiliar, or even find the people that can help you get comfortable in those new roles, that's really the first step. And to me, it also starts with the right people. And it doesn't necessarily mean employees. It might just mean a consultant. It might mean an advisor. It might mean a peer that says, have you struggled with this? Help me. I haven't seen this before. Help get me through it. Sometimes business owners are proud enough they don't ask the right questions. And if they did, the road ahead might be just a little bit smoother. And, I see it all the time when owners call and they say, I've had it, especially the last 3-4 years with the labor shortage. I can't find good help. Nobody wants to listen. And we start talking about delegation. And it come to find out they really don't know how to delegate or even build a team. Well, that's going to be a challenge. So you've got to get the right people in place. And there's multiple ways that can happen. And I know, Tim, that's right down your lane. You can certainly help. But when it comes to staying strategic, it's okay to dip back down in the weeds every now and again. Somebody may quit. You might have the right large loss. You might have a cat project come along that just pulls you back into the weeds. And you don't want to miss that, of course. So it's okay to do that as long as it doesn't become the norm. But if you don't have the right people in place and the trust to go with, and I know that word trust is a big word, which we'll talk about. If that's not in place between the owner and the team, you'll probably forever stay in the weeds. And that's not a good place to exist as a business owner.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so good segue back to Tim then. Tim, you've used the phrase of, and maybe this woman that you were talking about was feeling a slave to your business. So how can owners stop feeling like a slave to their businesses every day?
Yeah, this one's near and dear to my heart, Michelle, and I love it. I've actually got 4 4 ways that I feel that owners can stop feeling like a slave to their business. And to give you a little context where this conversation starts, especially with younger businesses that are early in their development, the owners get to a point where they don't know whether it's the chicken or the egg thing. Do I hire more people? Do I go out and sell more? I have all these things to do in my business, but I don't have the time to do them. We've all got 24 hours in a day, and we certainly can't invent more time, but there are definitely 4 strategies that I think that business owners can use to stop feeling like they're slaves to their business. The first one is know what their strengths are as individuals and stick to them. Almost everybody that starts a business has some unique skill set that they bring to the table, whether it's the trade that they're employed in, finance and accounting knowledge, operations knowledge, sales and marketing. They're good at something. The worst mistake a business owner can make that feeds that slavery thing is to continue trying to do things in the business that they don't know how to do, right? Stay focused on the things that you are, use that strength to your advantage. A close second to that is, while you're focusing on the things that you're good at, outsource the things that you're not. Don't try to keep the books if you don't know what basic accounting or bookkeeping is. Don't try to go out and make sales calls if you're not good at it. Everybody has to have a fundamental understanding of how to do those things when they first start a business as an owner operator. But once your business gets off the ground, take those things that you're really not good at, you don't enjoy doing, and outsource them to people that can do it better than you can. The third thing is delegate routine tasks. And I've said this for years, and JT, you made the comment, most people don't know how to delegate. I've got a real simple rule when it comes to delegating activities in a business. If whatever it is that you have to do does not require your specific knowledge or skill set to do it, find somebody else to do it. Because chances are they can do it better than you, for one. But secondly, because your time is valuable. And if you can produce or bring more value to your business by doing something that is more strategic in nature, like what we're talking about, then the routine stuff can go to somebody that can produce it at the same level of quality or even better. And then the fourth thing is invest in your people, invest in your labor through training and development. It's the old cliche says, well, what if I train them and they leave? And then, the response to that is, what if you don't train them and they stay? That's almost a worse scenario. So those are my 4 strategies, Michelle, for stopping the slavery scenario that a lot of business owners find themselves in.
Perfect. I love all 4 of those steps. Those are really good. So I'm hoping that both of you, and it's JT, we'll start with you, can talk about, from your experience, the qualities you've seen in some of the best owners in the restoration industry. You've both talked to so many. What are some of the best qualities you're seeing the best owners with the healthiest companies, with the biggest visions that they're chasing effectively? What are some of the qualities that those owners are holding on to?
Well, first, I think they realize they don't have to do it all themselves, right? Because they can do it doesn't mean they have to. And they've realized that the business maybe has outgrown their skill sets and they've needed to learn new things. And that's really hard for some people. It sounds simple, but it's a challenge, especially when you're bogged down with all the day-to-day responsibilities and you're using your quote free time to go learn something new. And at the end of the day, there may not be any free time. So I think it starts with a mindset that they've got to change. And if you recognize that, for some people, that's 80% of the battle. And then realizing the personalities in the business, the type of leadership, managing, and we all know managing and leadership are completely different. But those who can set even a base level vision, and I'm not talking about a grand vision, but let's do something other than get through Thursday or through Friday. Let's set something to the end of the quarter or the end of the year. It doesn't have to be a 5-year plan. But if you can manage through some KPIs, just the data and the accountability, and set the expectations for a team, well, now it becomes a self-selective process, right? The leadership piece. If the management is in place, then the leadership, I think, has a smoother road. But if the management isn't in place, leadership's going to struggle. And Tim may have a comment on that, but over the years, I've noticed that if there's clear KPIs, clear defined roles, everyone knows their responsibilities, how they're incentivized, then the leadership, you get self-motivating people, and the leadership is a fraction of the effort that it could be.
Yeah, I'll agree 100% with you, JT. Once they have clarity on the vision, the sense of responsibility as a manager. Now, I'm speaking as somebody who has run people's businesses for a living and not necessarily own my own. But once you have clarity on where the owner wants to go with things, it becomes a heck of a lot easier to buy into that and to execute, because you know what your accountabilities are at that point. But to your point, Michelle, characteristics of owners that effectively make that transition. I've always been a firm believer in discipline, and it's something that we try to instill with our clients at Viola Management. But there is one characteristic that comes out that I'll never forget. And I worked with a client for almost 10 years, about 9.5 years. And we saw his business from a very small carpet cleaning outfit to a multi-million-dollar sale at the end. So we got to see both ends of the spectrum, which was really cool. And I've got a close friendship with this individual today. And one night we were having a few cocktails, and I said, "What did you learn over the years?" And he said, I learned really the secret to my success was being able to know when to keep my mouth shut and my ears open, and really listen to my employees, to listen to the advice I was being given, survey the room. And then act in a calculated manner. So I thought that was a great story and a great piece to share.
That is, we so often get caught up, I think, especially owners, in speaking and directing, but listening can get us so far. That is really wise advice. I love that. So, so far we've kind of talked about the concept of individual owners. So really quick, let's highlight the difference between if it's a husband and wife ownership team, or there's multiple owners or partners in a business. How does this kind of change with, I guess if there's multiple owners in a business, what do they need to be doing to be sure that they're aligned on the vision for the business and communicating that same vision across the board? So there isn't, I know that you can run into some trouble if you have two different owners that are communicating different things and going different directions. So Tim, you want to take that one first?
Yeah, I mean, to me, well, first, whether it's a husband and wife or whether it's two individual business partners, it's a marriage. whether it is or it isn't, formally at home. And we work with a lot of family business owners. We've worked with a lot of partnerships over the years as well. But separating the business as an entity from the individuals is really paramount to that. If you go into it, and everybody does, with their own personal motives and their own personal agendas, and they aren't able to put those on the side for what is best for the company, then you set yourself up for conflict. And we've seen partnerships dissolve. We've seen marriages, unfortunately, dissolve. And both reasons, right? I mean, sometimes a husband and wife will decide, hey, look, I'm gonna exit the business because otherwise it's gonna cost us our marriage. We've seen just the opposite too, where people actually got divorced because they said we're better business partners than we are spouses. But either way, regardless of which way you go with it, there is got to be that kind of separation of church and state in viewing the business as a living, breathing entity in and of itself. And they're the leaders of that entity.
JT, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, some of the most successful businesses, Tim, you're probably in the same boat. Some of the most successful businesses are husband-wife teams or two partnerships. Not to stereotype, but one will typically be an office manager and run all things office, finance, collections, etc. And the other one is all things operations and strategy out in the field. And there's a trust, especially if it's a married couple. Somebody's watching all the money, somebody's watching all the projects, and it's a nice balance. The challenge with that is, with many couples, is there's nothing else to talk about. They work all day together, they go home and they're talking business. And they wake up, they're talking business. They interview people together, and it's a grind. And I've got several phone calls over the years, basically saying it's my husband needs to choose the business or me or vice versa, but this dual role, I'm saying it can't be both. And that's very frustrating. And there are, of course, no winners. But what happens for long-term value is a buyer can't come along and replace two people. That's really hard to do, especially if they're 35, 45, 50 hours a week, like so many of us work. And so many times the advice is to start to remove maybe somebody in the office and get them phased out over the next year or two, because it's intimidating when a buyer comes along and says, I've got to replace two people, not just the one out in the field, but both. Think of the institutional knowledge that's lost with 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years of combined knowledge. It's intimidating. And the alternative solution to that is an extended transition period. We can do all the right things, but that husband-wife team hypothetically can't sell and 2 weeks later be in the Caribbean. That's not going to happen. They can't take all that knowledge with them without extended transition. So there's a little bit of planning that needs to take place, and that should start 2 or 3 years in advance, not 2 or 3 weeks or months.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about, for owners that are listening, or leaders, managers, whoever that are listening, what are some of the key areas if they're thinking, okay, I need to start letting go of more. Maybe I've let go of some and I need to let go of more, or maybe I've let go of none and I really, really got to start letting go. What are some of the first areas? Tim, you did kind of talk about this a little bit at the beginning, but what are some of the first areas that owners can start letting go of that will have a pretty big impact to hopefully help get that snowball going of being able to release and let go of more and more? Tim, you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two. I've got two answers really. One is a pretty obvious choice with the finance and accounting side of the business, simply because most owners, that's not their strength. Some that come from finance backgrounds or come from maybe engineering type backgrounds, they like to delve in the numbers, and they get caught in that cliche trap of paralysis by analysis. So they spend more time sitting at the desk staring at spreadsheets than they really should going out and actually actively working in the business. That's an easy one to give up because it's probably one of the easiest to outsource and correct, as long as the clarity of reporting coming back is pretty clear. But as far as impactfulness goes, the operations side of any business, any service business that is, represents the largest portion of your employee roster, your assets, your all that stuff. So to me, that one's critical in that you start delegating responsibility and clarifying the expectations of what it means to be a producer in the business, and then holding people accountable really for living up to those expectations and producing the results that you need them to on that side. Let them figure out, give them the goals, and then let them figure out how to get to those goals. That has probably the most impact, I think, initially on a business right out of the gate.
Yeah, I think to add on to that, there's a tremendous amount of outsourcing options today, many more than there were 7 to 10 years ago. And sometimes as business owners, we don't know where to turn for answers. And sometimes it's hard to ask for solutions, but there's so many options, between HR and estimating and answering the phone and collections. And there's many times those services can offer solutions and efficiency that we can't even do as well as we think we can in-house. So it's something to look at moving forward, especially if owners are trying to take some hats off and get them delegated.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Well, okay. To kind of round out this first episode, Tim, I wanted to toss it over to you and ask the question, is there such a thing as giving up too much? Is there such a thing as like, I gave over too many things to other people? Or can restoration companies operate effectively without any sort of owner involvement at all whatsoever?
The answer to the second question, I believe, is yes, Michelle. I do believe that companies can operate absent an owner, as long as the owner doesn't want to continue to draw the top salary in the organization, because they're going to need somebody pretty strong at the top that they're going to have to reward very handsomely to do that in their absence. But I do feel, especially with small businesses, it is important for an owner to be present. Regardless of whether their name's on the shingle or not, it doesn't matter. They were the founders of that organization, and any organization, I believe, can benefit from some degree of involvement. As long as they recognize, hey, when it gets to a point where my people are probably doing a better job at leading this thing than I am, that's when you back off and you know when to get involved and when not to get involved again.
That is a perfect segue to episode 2. So you're going to have to tune back in for episode 2. We're going to talk about management teams and the role that they play in chasing the vision. So Tim and JT, anything else that you want to add in the ownership conversation before we wrap it up?
Oh, I think we're good. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you. See you guys on the next episode.